I create people and places out of 26 letters and a handful of punctuation. I write to understand, I write to explain, and I write to remember. I wrote my first book when I was 7, and it was called The Big Book of Why, a really creative title. And in this book, I tried to answer questions I'd always felt curious about. Philosophical questions like, why are pancakes flat? And why are peaches fuzzy? I remember feeling more excited than nervous to present my book in class in 2nd grade. Back then, I was fine with sharing my stories and ideas in front of other people. But that changed after I grew older and I moved from school to school to school. I was tired of being the new kid, so I tried to become a chameleon instead. I started to become more and more self-conscious, and I spoke less and less in class. My classmates and teachers would always ask, "Why are you so quiet?" It was a question I never knew how to answer. Quiet seemed like a quality I wasn't supposed to have, so instead of asking about pancakes or peaches, I asked, "Why am I so quiet? Why is it so hard for me to speak up? It doesn't make any sense." And it didn't help that I compared myself to my older sister, who loved speech and debate, and she was an avid debater in high school. While she was off winning state competitions in Lincoln and Douglas debate, I was at home making comic books that felt more and more childish. I had no idea that she was also struggling with shyness, but tried not to let it show. I wanted to be more like her, confident, certain, assertive. But I never expected that poetry would help. The summer after my sophomore year, I attended a creative writing program at Cal Arts. And one night, there was an open mic where people from all different disciplines came to speak. There were people from creative writing, or theater, or animation, or dance. They all signed up to perform poetry. Some people's voices boomed, others relied more on the microphone. There were poems on topics ranging from depression to mangoes. There were love poems, angry poems, sad poems, hopeful poems. And when people perform spoken word, the audience does not remain silent. You snap when you hear a powerful line, and people clap and cheer and whistle, and this incredible energy filled the room. For those of you who don't know, spoken word poetry is a bit different from written poetry. Written poetry usually requires more time to unpack and understand, and you have to read and reread. But spoken word is like emotions condensed. A lot of the time it's fierce, it's unapologetic, it's raw, and I felt inspired to share my own poems that night. I almost raised my hand when they called for any last volunteers, but I still hesitated because I didn't know if I wanted to share something so personal in front of 40, 50 people. But I regretted not speaking. I regretted letting my anxiety hold me back from what I wanted to do. I wanted to do what scared me. I wanted to prove to myself and to other people that I could perform. I wanted to share stories that maybe, just maybe, would help other people. So when I heard about a poetry slam at the Cupertino Library a few months later, I signed up and I tried not to think about how nervous I would become. But on the night of the event, I felt like I was a walking, talking disaster. My hands were quivering, my voice was shaking. I didn't even know if people could understand what I was saying, but after the event, people came up to me and said, "Thank you for performing." They said my poems were powerful, and they said they hoped to see me perform again. And they started to think, okay, Maybe this does terrify me, but why should I let that stop me? I performed at more events. I participated in more open mics, more poetry slams. I published my poems. I participated in Poetry Out Loud, which is a national poetry recitation competition. And even though I didn't advance to the state level, there were so many people supporting me. There were 3 English teachers coaching me, encouraging me. There were classmates, and Poetry Club was there cheering for me. Yeah, I was one lucky aspiring poet, and I still am an aspiring poet, but I felt so grateful and so glad to have all those people behind me, cheering me on. And around that time, I also discovered this quote by Amelia Earhart, that the fears are paper tigers. Something that might seem terrifying might in fact not be that scary once you face it head on. For me, public speaking was like this a few years ago. It terrified me. I tried to avoid it as much as possible. But after forcing myself to speak up over and over again, it's starting to become a bit more like this. And maybe a few years from now, I'll look back on the present and my fears will be like this. And I think we all carry certain fears. We all have paper tigers that seem like actual tigers. But it is possible to shrink those tigers back into paper ones, to unfold them, to end up with that wrinkled square sheet of paper and start over again. If you feel like you're too quiet, too loud, that you never stand up for yourself, if you feel frustrated about yourself for any reason, it is possible to change. And it is possible to fold yourself into the person you want to become. And little by little, word by word, line by line, I'm becoming a bit more confident. And I've discovered that poetry not only helps individuals speak up, but also entire communities. Earlier this year, I participated in March for Our Lives in San Jose, and at the end there were 3 or 4 speakers who performed poetry. And even though it was raining that day and water was soaking into my shoes and my glasses were covered with raindrops, we were cheering, we were shouting, we were holding up our posters. And that same energy washed out over the crowd. And inspired by the poems that they shared, I'd like to end this talk with a poem that I wrote, inspired by March for Our Lives. And it's called, "This is Not Enough." This is not a drill, the intercom blares. It's the principal, but not the principal. It's a code red, but not a drill. It's a Wednesday afternoon. But instead of leading us through the next song, Mrs. Brown is locking the door. We were going to pull out the xylophones if we had extra time. We were going to sing happy birthday for Kyle because Kyle is turning 9, but this is a code red. And this is not a drill. The blinds down, the door block, the lights off. And the minutes bleed into waiting, waiting, until a flurry of all clear lights on chairs down file out. Mr. T is here to lead us back to homeroom. As we settle into plastic seats, Mr. T stands pale and silent before us. In a low voice, he tells us he was at the front of the school with the principal. There was a man wearing a trench coat and sunglasses. The man was holding a gun. The man was not happy, even though it's Kyle's happy birthday. "Keep an eye on him," the principal said, then hurried into the office to announce the code red that was not a drill. Mr. T didn't dare blink. Alone he stayed, just him and the armed man. When I was 5, I fell victim to KISSING songs. I thought I'd die of humiliation. But people are KILLING, children. My age, older, younger, the adults they might have been. But we raise our hands to remember the spread of red that code reds bring, the sobs and the sting and the wails and the grief and the shots and the screams. We seek an end to this. Because America, dear America, we will speak.